Hello and welcome to Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited you could join me today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Now, on the Silicon Alley Podcast, I talk to entrepreneurs and top performers to understand what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll get actionable advice that you can apply in your own business and life. Now, on today's episode, I sit down with Karen Swyszcz, a digital entrepreneur and jack of all trades. Now, before I jump into Karen's bio and what you can expect on today's episode, if you have not already, subscribe and follow the Silicon Alley Podcast so you get notified when a new episode drops every Friday. And if you hear something you like, be sure to share the podcast with others on social media, text, email, or however you prefer. Today's guest, Karen Swyszcz, is the co-founder of Kaibigan Connection, an organization that is dedicated to connecting Filipinx entrepreneurs and professionals. When Karen is not working on building Kaibigan Connection, she can be found at the gym teaching group fitness classes, body pump, and body attack. In 2019, she co-authored a best-selling book in the women's health category on Amazon called Fitness to Freedom and launched a business and technology podcast called the Bacon, Bits, and Bites podcast. You're definitely going to want to check out her podcast. You might hear a familiar voice as I had the pleasure of being a guest on the podcast and talking about my experience in personal finance as well as building Ostrich. Karen co-authored a book as well called Lighting the North that looks at feminism and diversity in Canada, which is set to publish this fall. Prior to that, from 2017 to earlier this year, Karen actually provided one-to-one consulting services and workshops for small business owners in blogging, social media, and the basics of WordPress. She's a part-time continuing and professional studies instructor with Sheridan College, where she teaches their blogging and social media strategy courses. Karen Swyszcz graduated from the University of Waterloo with a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry. She started Makinthebacon as a hobby blog back in 2012 as a way to escape her monotonous day job. Over the years, it has evolved into a platform initially providing content on personal finance that now focuses on entrepreneurship. From 2017 to earlier this year, Karen provided one-to-one consulting services and workshops for small business owners in blogging, social media, and the basics of WordPress. She's a part-time continuing and professional studies instructor with Sheridan College, where she teaches their blogging and social media strategy courses. A wide-ranging conversation. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Karen Swyszcz.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying I'll never leave this place. Some words got you searching for the bright side over and over until you're looking on the
All right, Karen, welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited to have you on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. We had a lot of fun chatting on my podcast, so it's kind of nice to be on the other end today.
Yeah, exactly. Flipping the script here and switching roles. So yeah, I had a lot of fun on your podcast as well. So thanks for joining me on Silicon Alley.
Oh, no problem.
So Karen, I'm really curious because you've done a lot of very interesting things in your kind of like trajectory in terms of work, career, and interests has kind of spanned all over the place. Talk a little bit about who you are and let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny when we talk about journey and when people say career, because to be honest, I feel as if I've never really had a specific career. So even as far as I can remember, I went to school or I started off in engineering and I didn't like that. I switched over to science. I didn't like that either, but it was more just to please my parents. Okay, I'll get a degree, which I'm not really using so much. Like I've never worked in a lab after school. I've had like many jobs, and I often tell people that I feel my path is not a ladder, but represents something such as, say, a jungle gym or a rock climbing wall. And then when you picture a rock climbing wall, obviously you're going like sideways and you're going like diagonal in order to get to where you need to be. So it was just one of those things, like had way too many jobs that I can count. I applied to grad school twice thinking that I would go back to school and realize, no, I've done everything from like personal training to working in retail to project management to working for the government. And then, yeah, so with respect to starting a blog, it was just kind of like a passion project I started while I was working for the government because unfortunately with a lot of government jobs, it's very like, stagnant and you're doing like the same thing over. It's very like rigid.
Yeah.
So, a blog was just kind of a way for me to like start a passion project and to get back into writing. And from there, like a lot of opportunities spawned.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I feel you when I was younger, the idea of a career was like, that sounds terrible. I don't want a career like the same thing forever. Like, like that sounds miserable. So I can relate and love the kind of analogy that you drew with the rock climbing wall or jungle gym there. It makes I think a lot more, a broader picture of how things really go. So where did the idea for the blog come from? And have you always been interested in writing, and it led into entrepreneurship and all that sort of stuff? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually, when I was a kid, I really enjoyed writing. In hindsight, I wish I had kept like all those notebooks of like stories and like poems and stuff. And it was interesting because in high school, I remember having a conversation with one of my English high school teachers. She was asking me what I was going to study in school, and she thought it would be something writing related, like journalism, English. And I'm like, nope, I'm going into engineering because I was kind of, I grew up with the idea that doing something creative, it wasn't a feasible career path. So I thought, okay, it'll just be something that it'll be a hobby. So in a sense, like the blog, it was nice in that I was able to reconnect with writing. And it was funny because actually the original intention of the blog, it wasn't to connect with writing. So how I stumbled upon blogging was I was planning for a wedding at the time, and we know how weddings can be pretty costly. So I was looking up ways to make money, ways to make more money, and actually starting a blog came up. So I was really fascinated by the idea, but it just ended up being like I did end up making some money from it, but it really ended up being so not only like a passion project, but then again, also like developing a lot of skills, meeting a lot of people who I probably wouldn't have met or connected through if I didn't start my blog. So. Yeah,
that's awesome. And yeah, just a Google search trying to figure out how do I make money? How do I pay for this wedding? And stumbled into this whole other world that has taken you in so many different directions now. Talk to me a little bit about how you built traction and sort of what that process was like of going from, all right, I'm going to start this thing to make a little bit of money, and then where it sort of like led you from there.
Okay, so like the blogging path, just like my career path, it was definitely not like a hockey stick type of trajectory, not at all. And again, because I was actually more focused on trying to build my full-time career at the time, the blog got put on the back burner a lot. So the first few years, I was #1 anonymous, and I was not consistent at all. I was just like, oh, I don't have time. And I think it wasn't until maybe up around like year 3 or 4, I just made that simple mindset shift. So I'm like, okay, you know what? If I want to take this seriously, I'm going to have to actually start putting in the work on a consistent basis. So what I tried to do was like during my lunch breaks, during my breaks, just try to read up on blogging, and then like connecting with people over social media and trying to carve out time in the evenings and weekends to work on it. And then from there, I started to see traction, and then brands started to reach out to me like, hey, do you want to work together? Do you want to like write a post for us? Do you want to do like guest postings? So it's something as simple as like a mindset shift, I think really helped. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, when you said you weren't very consistent in the first couple of years, what does that look like, just for context? Is that like, like once every 6 months, every couple months, or like
pretty much like that? I think maybe there'd be like the one odd time where like, okay, I have this sprint, I'll like write twice a month, and then several months will pass and like, okay, one post month. But like now, I think I'm pretty good at I've been trying to do it twice a month.
Okay. Yeah, I think finding that whatever works for you in terms of consistency. I was just curious what that looked like, how you were defining it.
Yeah. So if people always ask like, what was your journey like? I'm like, I made all the mistakes. So don't worry if you're not consistent right away or you're making all these mistakes. It's all part of the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like building up like on Google SEO and brand and all that stuff takes time as well. So yeah, it's in your favor to take it at pace, sort of, so to speak. So what was it like getting those first brands to reach out to you? And what was kind of like that process of going from, okay, I'm taking it seriously, I'm going to be consistent, and now I'm actually monetizing and making money off of this?
It was really cool. So it was kind of thing like, hey, I'm kind of running like a little side hustle because Actually, growing up too, I was not very entrepreneurial. Like I didn't have a lemonade stand. I think back to, when the schools have those fundraisers and you have to sell, what was it, like chocolate or, what I did? I made my parents do it. So I like gave them the form and I'd be like, okay, mom, dad, can you go to your work and like ask them to like buy this and support me? So I outsourced in the beginning.
There you go. Developing those outsourcing skills.
Yeah, so it was really cool to even think that they would want to work with me. They saw something, or if people wanted to like pay to publish a post, I thought like, oh wow, they thought my blog was worth publishing on. But like the one thing, I guess one of my biggest regrets was not really being true to the brand and focusing on the money. So some of the older posts, they're not really in line with what Makinthebacon was about. So I kind of regret only focusing on the money and, thinking like more, not thinking about like, well, is this going to confuse my audience because this doesn't really relate to what I'm blogging about in the first place.
Yeah, balancing the monetization aspect with the voice and the value that you're bringing to your audience, I think is key, right? So that's interesting that you say that you weren't entrepreneurial and at all. So like, how did that shift? At what point were you like, okay, like I guess I am entrepreneurial and like I can do this thing?
Yeah, I guess like the blog itself. So, as I started to get in like queries and then just like connecting people to the collaborations, I thought like, oh, okay, it's kind of like a side hustle. But during that time, I still felt like, okay, I should focus on my full-time job, my full-time career. Again, it's still like putting it on the back burner, but it wasn't actually until I think after a year working at a startup, and I think just kind of being in that ecosystem, like the entrepreneurial fire just started to like burn a little bit more. I started to think, oh, maybe eventually, in a few years, I can look into going out on my own, doing something. But it's interesting in that early 2017, I got let go from the job. So it's almost as if like my wish was granted several months earlier. And I thought like, oh, okay, I guess now I have this time. And instead of deciding to go and look for other jobs, I thought like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try and go from there. And then, so the past few years, like been doing consulting and workshops, and then like more opportunities sprung. So it's interesting to think, if I had decided to, stay at jobs and work at jobs for the past few years, that I wouldn't have been as further along as I am today.
Yeah, everything sort of happens for a reason. You could obviously have looked at losing the job as being like, oh man, this is not good. Instead, you had something going and had an opportunity. So talk to me about that transition and moving into the consulting side and sort of like what that process was like of building up the consulting practice.
So it was like one of those things, I guess, when anybody starts like their own startup, the person is like, I don't know what I'm doing, or just kind of doing a lot of experimenting. And then I found it was very overwhelming, just trying to learn and then learning how to like wear all the hats, just being responsible for everything, being accountable. Like nobody else was really keeping you accountable. I would say it was a very, very steep learning curve. And again, like not really having any business background. So yeah, I found it was very difficult, but at the same time, I guess, because I've always been one of those people who likes to take on challenges. It was like, okay, this is like tough AF, but I'm going to like, push through it. I'm going to try get through it. And so, yeah, it was very like exciting, that feeling when you get your first paying customer, your first paying client, like, oh my God, they want to pay me for like, doing something.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess what were some of those challenges that you faced early on?
I think, and sometimes even now too, is the self-doubt. And again, going back to like, well, I don't have any business background. I'm like, I'm not a business person. How can I run a business? So having that imposter syndrome. And then also too, trying to like convince people, because it's interesting now like that we're still in the pandemic talking about like having to be online, having an online presence, very important. So even just a few years ago, like having some conversation with entrepreneurs and small business owners, they were like, oh no, you can only do in person, like person to person is the only way. And, like online, building a network online or like social media, it doesn't work. But of course, we both know that it does work if you do it properly and if you develop a strategy. So I guess just trying to get people into that mindset. Like, I do understand having person-to-person conversations are very important, but I think there's situations where you can't. Like, say, for example, you and I, you're based in New York. I'm based west of Toronto. Like, I'm not going to, travel 8 hours to record a podcast. So technology and being online has enabled us to connect with people. So it's really nice, even though like a pandemic had to change people's minds. It's nice that people now are realizing the value of the need to shift your business online.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And technology is definitely enabling these types of connections that we're having across countries. And, there's so many opportunities that you see in the online space, and everyone trying to build up brand presence, and whether it's social media or content or things like that, there's just so much opportunity that if you're willing to put in the work and do the networking, you can definitely make a good amount of money online and using, the tools of the internet. So I love that. Now, talk to me. You've done a few other things too, best-selling author, a number of things. Talk to me about sort of the next stage in the journey. You start building up this consulting practice, you get over that imposter syndrome and are having success. Talk to me a little bit about what comes next and sort of all the things that you're dabbling in and have dabbled in along the way.
Yeah. So in addition to the consulting, actually, I ended up landing a job at a local college teaching blogging and social media, which is kind of interesting because I think, maybe just like several years ago, that type of course at like an accredited institution, that would have been unheard of. Like it would be something more like online. So it was kind of cool to do that. But it's funny because that particular opportunity, like I wasn't even planning on that at all. It was just kind of more, again, a random email reaching out and then having conversations, and they say like, hey, we're looking for somebody to teach blogging. I'm like, well, I have a blog. I've been blogging for several years, like putting two and two together. So that was kind of interesting too. Being able to teach people like about my experience and like showing them the value of like having an online presence and sharing your story, I think is pretty cool. And then from there, doing a lot of like workshops. Again, I found that I enjoyed teaching. And I think in addition to also being like a group fitness instructor, just, sharing your knowledge, teaching people, and then like motivating to do the things they didn't think they could do before.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, the working at a college, an accredited institution as an instructor for exactly what you started the business is really, really unique. How did that opportunity come about?
So originally I was thinking of doing workshops. So my plan was to send an email to reach out to somebody who was teaching a course and just say, hey, I need some help like setting up a course. I'm not sure. And that email bounced back. And, usually when I guess an email bounced back, you think nothing of it. Okay, I'm going to move on. But then I saw there was a contact name, like who to contact instead. So I reached out to this person and then asked, I'm looking for information on how to teach a workshop, how to teach a course, because I want to do this for my business. And then she replied back saying like, well, we're looking for people to teach our courses. Would you be interested? And yeah, I definitely thought it was a good idea because, again, just I think like seeing on your resume that you teach the subject at a college or university, it shows that you know what you're talking about. And again, just sharing my experience with other people, again, and I think it's interesting that people would take the course because then they see the value, like they want to learn how to build that online presence. So yeah, it was just one of those random things. And it's funny that you asked that because people are always asking me, like I'm doing all these different things. They ask like, how did you find out about this? Like, who did you talk to? I'm like, honestly, I just asked. Like I'm the type of person who asks a lot of questions, asks, to collaborate and stuff. Like I'm not afraid to ask, even though like, of course there's a chance that they'll say no, but really it's like how the saying goes, if you never ask, the response will always be no, and you'll never like get your answer. Yeah.
No, I love that attitude. And I mean, yeah, that curiosity, that ability to just ask, because what's the worst thing that happens? No, and a bounce back email and, you move on with your life, or someone doesn't respond and that's it. You move on to the next opportunity. So I love that. I love that attitude. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing now with, it's pronounced Kaibigan Connection?
Kaibigan.
Kaibigan. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because I'm starting to see a little bit of the mission and sort of what you want to accomplish. And I want to talk about what this particular business that you're doing does.
Yeah, for
and the
sure.
mission behind it.
This particular thing, again, this was an idea and a passion project. So at the time, I didn't have like a business plan or long-term vision. It was really more a conversation, just having with another entrepreneur, my co-founder, Rigel Jones, asking like, oh, hey, we're both Filipino entrepreneurs. Like, I think there's a few of us out there. Wouldn't it be great if we could just like have an event to connect them? So we ended up having one event, and it was great. And it was just crazy in that, like, I thought, why can't I reach out to sponsors? So even just, again, like going for that asking people who like I didn't really have a relationship with, just telling them, this is what I'm doing, this is the goal of the event. And they were completely on board. And it was just funny because like I was happy with, okay, as long as we get people at the event, I'm good. And it was great. I think we had about 20 or 30 people at the event. And it was nice in that people came up to us and then also sent us messages after saying, this is a really great event. The key question was, when's the next event? And then I thought to myself, oh crap, it wasn't really on my radar, because at the time, like both of us, because we have our own businesses, like I was focusing on Makinthebacon and then she was focusing on her own business. So we never really gave it that much thought. But then, more opportunities and more people started to reach out to us. So we ended up doing like this retreat for female entrepreneurs. And then we had like a couple more events. And then one of the events, it ended up being like, in addition to a networking and speaker panel, we had like a vendor marketplace. So then some people were able to set up tables, and then people, and I swear, every time people at each event was like, when's the next one? When's the next one? I had a great time. Like, when's the next one? I'm like, oh, okay, we're just going to keep on going. So I felt it wasn't until maybe late last year, early this year, actually, that, began to see the real potential. Like, okay, I think this can actually scale, versus like with Makinthebacon, I didn't really feel, or I was starting to feel that it couldn't scale. So yeah, it was just crazy. One of these, like, I have an idea, let's see what works. And I'll be honest, like any entrepreneur, you have a lot of ideas and not all of them are going to be successful, right? So it was kind of cool, like a nice surprise that this one, it like seeing the potential.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely great when people are asking you when's the next event. It means that you're throwing good events.
I know, I wasn't planning on being an event planner, but somehow kind of like fall into it. And I think it's like, especially like with the businesses and the roles, we never really planned too much to do it. But I'm like, okay, I guess like now I've taken on that role of, being like an event planner and now like a community builder, because it's just funny how those things happen. Yeah,
no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. So I guess one of the things I'm curious is like, what really drives you, right? You've done all these different things. There's some themes that are starting to come up in terms of coaching and helping people, bringing people together. Like, what is it that really drives you, Karen, when you think about like your motivation?
That's actually a good question. I had to like think about it too when I saw it. I think, well, in the beginning, I would say like growing up, I've always been, and I think I still am, like an ambitious person. So I think, what drives me is success or like those titles and stuff. But then I realized, ever since I guess starting a business and starting a blog, what really drives me is, helping people. And I think helping people realize or encouraging them to kind of seek opportunities and create opportunities. Because like a lot of the things, like I seeked out on my own, like, and I'm also an impatient person. Like, I can't wait for this. I'm just going to like, go and do it myself. So I think, trying to help people realize like you can do this, because you always hear a lot of people say like, I hate my job. I hate my career. I hate this. I hate this. And really trying to emphasize, okay, I get it. You hate it. I've been there. Like a lot of us have been there, but it's more so like you really need to try and like take actions or like ask questions, like figure out what are the next steps for you to get to where you want to go. Like, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be like being a full-time entrepreneur, just even starting, I think like just starting that side hustle or just making that career change you've always wanted to make. Yeah, no, I love that. And so you said that it's not titles, or early on it might've been titles and trying to find success, but how would you define success today? I think now that I'm much older and a little bit wiser, I would say that success really is having a purpose-driven life. And again, tying back to not necessarily like, having a business, but I think being able to do the things you want to do. So say, having a job that gives you like flexibility. I don't know, even just something as simple like starting a passion project or doing a hobby. And another thing too, I think people tend to overlook too is success is being healthy. Because I say like health is wealth. Like I've had jobs in the past that have been detrimental to like my physical, emotional, and mental health. And if those things aren't, if those things aren't working, then the rest of you isn't working. Like you'll find it hard to focus. Like I remember like one of my jobs, like I would always look at like the clock every day and I would be like angry, and it actually like took the anger out on my boyfriend, now husband. And it's funny because I mentioned him like, thank you so much for putting up with me during like those times, because it's really important, I think, to find something that makes you happy or enables you to find other things that make you happy. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if you're not happy, then nobody else around you, I think, is going to be happy. It's just going to spill out to all your other things.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And being able to balance, your physical, mental health and all that stuff to be able to enable you to do the things that you want to do, follow your passions and live that passion sort of driven life, or whether it's even if it's just a side hustle or something along those lines. What have you found helps ground you, helps get you focused, or if you are feeling a little bit off, like what are some of the things that you do from a self-care perspective?
I like to read, so I'll do like reading. But what I really have found has helped me for as long as I can remember is just being active. So just trying to get that workout in. So say, for example, this morning I did like a body combat, which is like a mixed martial arts. So it was really satisfying, like kicking and punching the air. So yeah. And then, I guess that's why, like I always emphasize like health, just again, because helps bring like clarity, helps me focus. And it's all about those endorphins. Yeah.
And also, I guess from another project and things that you've done, that's what the book was about, correct? Was in the fitness industry and also being a fitness instructor and all that.
Yeah, so that opportunity was like really cool. I wanted to jump on board just because I felt it was important to share my story, because I found like I've been teaching group fitness for about 11 years now. And I found that a lot of the times my members, the people ask me like, oh, you make it look so easy. And I'm like, it was not easy. So just imagine trying to go through the training, having to talk and lift weights and, be motivating and be like in time with the music, being able to like coach people on their form and, being encouraging. It was very, very tough. I'd have to say, actually, that was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life. And I found, because I'm naturally like an introverted person, like I have a bit of social anxiety. So for me to get up on stage to lead a class, that was very crazy. And first, like, what am I doing? Like, can I even do this? And now, like, I don't know. It's funny. I feel like I take on this, like, it's a different persona. It's my rock star persona. Like, I'm a completely different person when I am on stage. Cause of course, you need to have that energy in the class. Yeah. Like nobody's want to go to a class where say like, all right, keep going. Good job. Like, have to show your energy, enthusiasm. But then afterwards, I kind of like go back to my little cocoon and be all introverted. So yeah, it was kind of cool to like share that story and share like the real side, that it was very tough for me, but I'm really glad that I was able to accomplish that.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. Being able to balance sort of your natural need from an introvert perspective to like have your own alone time to recharge, but then also that rock star persona to get out and motivate and get things done and inspire people through the fitness classes that you're teaching. So that's awesome. I love that. So Karen, what advice would you have for someone that was just starting out, or maybe they've been dabbling in some side project, a blog, a YouTube channel, something along those lines? What advice would you have to someone that's just getting started?
I would tell them to keep going, and I guess not to be so caught up with what everybody else is doing, because I think especially the common topic, like saying in social media, it looks as if there's instant success, but to realize that, you know, if you want to make something out of this, you need to be in it for the long haul. And I think it's okay to take breaks from it and to take a step back, but to not necessarily like, you know, give up entirely. Just maybe think, okay, I've hit this wall. What can I do to break through it? Or just maybe try and find a mentor to talk it out.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that a lot. That perseverance, I think, is so key. And especially if you're doing anything in the online space where you're constantly comparing yourself on social media and all that stuff, it's so easy to get caught up in that. Well, so-and-so looks like they're, you know, having a ton of success and they just started, and, you know, there's so much more that goes into it, and also sustaining and being able to actually build something that's going to last. So I love that advice. I'm curious, we kind of skipped over it, but you did shut down the consulting practice. And I'm curious, Karen, what led you to shut that down and focus on other things? Like, what was the reason behind that?
So it was really interesting because last year, I like to think of it, it was a very weird year. Like, it started off good, and I'm like, okay, I had clients, and I'm like, everything seemed rosy, but it was strange. It was like around March, I have to say, kind of hit that wall, just starting to not feel really motivated. And I thought, okay, maybe this is just like a little bump. You know, this happens all the time to entrepreneurs. You can get through it. You've experienced bumps before. You can get through it. And yeah, it was weird. Like, I don't know if I was trying to like compensate, but I just started taking on all these other like little projects to keep myself busy. And one by one, they started to like fall by the wayside. Like, I started to also lose motivation. And those are like no fault of their own. And then I thought, maybe, okay, I need to rebrand. Like, everyone's rebranding. Lots of people rebrand. Do it. So I was thinking all these sorts of different ways I could like pivot Makinthebacon. I thought women in tech. I thought like, oh, it could be a career website. It could be a media website. And no matter how hard I tried to attempt to like rebrand it, it just wasn't working. But then, like in hindsight, I think about like where my energy, like what was it pulling me towards? And I noticed like for the most part, it was pulling me towards like working on the podcast, but then also working on Kaibigan Connection. And at the time I didn't really see it. I thought, because I always joke, I have Wonder Woman syndrome. I can do anything and everything. Like, no, you can't do it, but I can do it. So I think like I can juggle everything. And then I just came to that realization like early on, having a conversation with someone. And then she was able to see the potential, but at the same time, you know, when you have a business, especially your first business, it's like your baby, right? Like, I didn't want to let go of it. I was so like resistant and hesitant, and like, I've worked so hard to build this brand, and people like love the brand, and this is what I'm known for, and to have to change again. But it was strange because, you know, as you talked about early on in the conversation, like with my career, like I've gone like everywhere. So why would it be any different with the business, right? Like, people are like constantly like shutting down and starting business, but for some reason I couldn't let go. So there was actually a lot of, it was very emotional, but then it's crazy because I've been telling people around that same month, I was like toying with the idea. I had this crazy dream, like it had to do with like fire. I was in like this building with fire, and there was like another building across the street, like a fire. And then I woke up thinking, what the heck was that? Of course I had to look it up, but apparently that kind of dream with fire symbolizes transformation, like a huge change is about to happen. So I thought, okay, maybe this is a sign. And then like the more I started to tell people that this was what I'm doing, like I'm now a social entrepreneur working on Kaibigan Connection. Yeah. At first, it seemed kind of weird because, you know, I was so used to talking about Makinthebacon, but the more confident I got. So it was really just a matter of time. And I think during like that time of trying to rebrand, I just kind of needed more time to figure things out, even though like at the same time I felt like, okay, I was trying to pick up the pieces, it wasn't working. I guess maybe it just wasn't the right time to fully focus on it. And now like this year, like it is the time to go full throttle with it.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, getting that sort of realization and then having the dream to help sort of signify like, okay, I think it's time to let go of this and accept this other thing that I'm really passionate about, and people
like
want
fire, right? Like
exactly. The perfect symbolism. So where do you see Kaibigan Connection in the future? Like when you think about like where you'd like the business to grow to?
It's crazy because like comparing it to Making the Bacon, like that was one of the biggest things, even though obviously with a lot of solopreneurs, they've scaled online, right? Like they have their memberships, like their online courses. For some reason with Making the Bacon, I couldn't see that. But with like Kaibigan Connection, I can see that growing. So originally when we started, it was in like the greater Toronto area. So Toronto and the surrounding cities and towns. And then word spread and like more people started to hear about us. And then we noticed like there were people from the US following us on Instagram. And then actually in February of this year, we went to Ottawa to do a national youth conference. So we thought, okay, like there's more potential, like we can like target the youth. So we see going even like outside of the GTA within the rest of Canada. And I think it's one of those things, again, to like talking about your goals and manifest and like having them manifest. And they started to happen. Like now we've been able to connect with people like from BC. And again, the fact that we've pivoted online to do virtual events, bringing in people from like California. And actually our last virtual workshop, we even had somebody from the Philippines, which we thought was really cool. So we can see the way I can see is just having more online events to reach people. Okay. And then also when it's safe to travel again, hopefully doing like in-person events like in different provinces. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And I guess in terms of engaging with the organization, is it specifically just for Filipinos, or is it like, for example, like if we wanted to connect with folks that are in the Filipino community, or like talk to me a little bit about how folks can engage with the business, brands, people, and support what you're doing?
Yeah, so as of right now, we don't have a website, but I'm hoping that'll be up end of the summer. But yeah, people can engage with us like on our social media. We also have a Facebook group. So like our target audience is really like for Filipino entrepreneurs, but that's not to say like non-Filipino entrepreneurs can't interact. It's just more, we kind of want to kind of showcase them, kind of give them voice, like highlight them. So.
No, yeah, it makes sense. I was just curious in terms of like supporting community. So could you describe your relationship with money?
From when I was a kid till now, or?
Sure. However, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when growing up, it was never really a conversation. My parents were more about, okay, just focus on school, like get good grades so you can get a good school and then you'll get into a good job. So I actually didn't really do that much. Like I didn't have a part-time job until like my last year of high school. Like I also worked a few summers, but again, it was really more emphasis on the grades. But it was interesting in that after I had my first job outside of school, my mom mentioned to me like investing in like mutual funds and bonds. And at first I was like, yeah, whatever. I just need money because I didn't have any when I was in school, right? So, but then eventually, like, what she said stuck and I began to explore it. So it's really interesting that like our conversations now, the usual mother-daughter, but then we add in the mix. She'll say like, oh, this stock was like up how many points? It's like, oh, the market's down now. Like, what like, do you know why?
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of funny because I'm not sure if there's a lot of mother-daughter conversations that are that are like that. So that was one of the things I'm very thankful for. She got me into like investing because I know, unfortunately, like for a lot of people, like their life savings have just gone off the wayside or whatever. But fortunately, like my stocks, they did take a hit, but they still ended up like bouncing back. Like it wasn't too much of a loss.
No, that's awesome that you have that relationship with your mom and like starting to push you towards like, hey, like look at this stuff. Look at stocks and mutual funds and all this kind of stuff. So it sounds like your relationship sort of developed over the years, and having her has been helpful. What would you say is the best investment that you've made, Karen?
I guess stock-wise, if we want to talk about, is investing in Alibaba's IPO. That was more of like nice. a play money. Like, okay, I have some extra money. Let's just see what happens. I don't know if I end up losing, but as you know, unfortunately, it actually ended up making me some money. But I think just kind of tying back into investing. So the best investment was investing to learn about investing, like taking the time. Like I'm not an expert, but I know a little bit. So just taking the time to learn about like the basics.
Yeah. And how did you learn? Like, how did you educate yourself?
Like for the most part, it was a lot of reading like the personal finance blogs. I think also trial and error too, and then realizing that, you know, I'm not really making any money off these GICs, the guaranteed investment certificates. And like I'm young enough that I can stomach the risk, like, because the stocks that I'm holding is more for the long term. So again, like just telling people, just the best way to learn is to try. Yeah. Trial and error. Because I think like a lot of people, they're kind of afraid of losing money. And yes, like there is no guarantee, like you'll keep all your money. Of course, you're going to lose money. But I think being okay with it and like realizing like, you know, I'm planning on holding this for some time, or like, you know, the market will eventually get back up. You know, it's part of the natural cycle. It goes up and down. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. Yeah. It's just, it's being able to stomach that sort of,
to like, I guess, separate volatility. Emotions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And take the emotions out of it and understand, hey, it's going to go up and down. And like, if I'm not touching it, it doesn't matter right this second. Yeah. So cool. What would you say is the worst investment that you've ever made, or the dumbest money mistake you've made?
You know, the funny thing is that like I naturally consider myself to be like a really frugal person. So it wasn't until I started my business that I actually started to make a lot of money mistakes. And in hindsight, like I guess I would have told myself to like set a budget, like set an amount, okay, this is the amount of money like you have, and here's how you're going to like spend it. And yeah, for some reason, I don't know why I didn't. Like I thought I needed to invest in everything, like all those things to start your business like right away, when in fact, you know, you don't need to have everything. Like you don't necessarily even need to have a website. So for example, like with Kaibigan Connection, we only have like our social media platforms, and we've still been able to like, you know, build a community and events. So yeah, I would tell myself like, you know, you really focus on trying to run your business lean. And then other like things I did was spend a lot of money on networking events and conferences. Like we understand the value of networking and conferences, but some of them were just like way too expensive. Like I should have not spent that kind of money on it. And then even traveling to go to different conferences and saying like, oh, it's a business trip. It's like a workcation. But, you know, when you think about it in reality, like you have to pay for like the flight, pay for the food and, you know, accommodations on top of paying for the conference. So in hindsight, I, you know, wish I like stuck more to like local conferences, but I was just like, no, I want to go away.
Yeah. What would you say is the best and worst part of entrepreneurship?
I think the best part is being able to like have all these ideas, and no matter like how crazy it is, but then being able to like implement it and, you know, bring it to life and to see it grow, I think is the coolest part.
Yeah.
With respect to the worst part, I think having to do everything, like wearing different hats. And then, you know, as you realize you like some hats better than others. And especially like in the early stages when it's either just yourself or your team is really small, you have to wear like all those hats. So sometimes it's just like, oh, I hate doing this, but you know, you need to do it. So
yeah. Yep. I agree with that one a lot. Yeah. What would you say, and I guess we can focus this more on Canada and Canadians, but what would you say is the biggest challenge facing Canadians when it comes to finances?
I guess like now, if we talk about the current state, is trying to navigate through like all these unprecedented financial challenges. Because I mean, you know, on top of, say, for example, you were having like a hard time saving, like now there's the idea of like unemployment, you know, your retirement savings, they've dwindled, your business, like having to deal with like trying to pivot, or like maybe you have to shut down the business. So I don't think there's one specific challenge, to be honest. I think it's just like all of those challenges, like this massive ball, and like just trying to like navigate that, because again, you know, it's still like we don't really know what's going to happen in the next few months. So I think the fact that there's so much uncertainty, but I guess if anything, to to just try and like, I guess in the States they call it the stimulus, and for us it's the service, just to really be like careful with your expenses, to just really focus on the bare necessities and like reach out to people too. I think talking about it too, because like in addition to being like isolated, I think that the financial challenges, they can feel more isolating, because you know how we talked about with the interview with you about like a lot of people, they have a hard time talking about finance, the emotional aspect, which is hence like why you created the Ostrich app. So I think the challenging thing too, in addition to dealing with it, is also I think talking about it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like if you're not willing to talk about it, then how can you help solve it? You know, like it's just you, and there's definitely people out there that might be able to help you. And that's interesting. So how do you think that we start to have those conversations? Like what is your thought around talking about money? Because there is that like, taboo, like kind of cringiness that just kind of comes with it.
Yeah. You know, that's actually a really good question. Cause I don't know, for me, like for both of us, we're like, yeah, okay, let's talk about it. Whereas others, and I don't know, I'm not exactly the most like tactful person, but I think maybe sharing the whole idea of like sharing articles of value, like, hey, I'm listening to this podcast, like maybe hopefully that can get the conversation going, versus saying like, why aren't you saving more money? Like rather than being like so in your face about it. Cause I think it's still a delicate topic, but we need to find like different ways to approach it. So I think maybe, in my opinion, just sharing content that would be valuable to them, that would be helpful.
No, I like that, versus the shaming of like, you should have X amount of money saved.
Yeah,
and if you don't,
exactly.
then
like, oh my
who
God.
are you? Yeah. Like, and it's like, we don't all start off in the same place. And there's so many other circumstances that approach isn't necessarily effective, of sort of guilting folks into making good financial decisions. So, well, awesome. Well, Karen, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you sitting down, and have really enjoyed both of our conversations on both platforms. I want to give you the last word. So whatever you'd like to share with the audience, please let us know how we can connect, support what you're doing, and any other words of wisdom you'd like to leave the audience with.
Yeah, for sure. So with a Kaibigan Connection, I guess I should spell it out maybe. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So it's Kaibigan Connection. And then if you want to connect with me personally, my site is makinthebacon.com. But my social media, the same across the board, but I tell everybody it's Makinthebacon with the number 1 at the end, because Makinthebacon was already taken. Like all those accounts already taken, so I had to add a 1.
Awesome. Well, Karen, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you sitting down.
Oh, no problem. Thank you again for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right. That's it for the Silicon Alley podcast. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Karen Swyszcz. If so, please share the episode with other folks that you think would get value. And if you have not already, please subscribe and follow the Silicon Alley podcast. That's it for today's episode. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Have a great one, everybody.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place. Some words got you searching for the bright side over and over until you